Welcome to Dread of Night. Have a seat and grab your favorite drink. Let me tell you about a little island called Poveglia, not far from Venice, Italy. Originally a quarantine zone for the Black Plague in the 18th century, it has long since been abandoned. But what if the plague never left? What if the plague was something more? Tonight's tale is titled The Final Words of Dr. Anna Latreya. Entry recovered from Dr. Latreya's datapad, found in front of the abandoned hospital on Poveglia Island, Venice, Italy. Start of transcription. I fear I don't have long before I draw my final breath, so I'll keep this concise. My name is Dr. Anna Latreya. The year is 2039, and I was leading an expedition into the island of Poveglia to find traces of the original plague strain from the 14th century. If anyone is reading this, then that hopefully means a cure was discovered. I am, or was, one of the lead researchers of the CDC when a new strain of the plague broke out in 2037. The aggressiveness of this strain, combined with the Earth's overpopulation of nearly 12 billion people, caused a massive decline in human life. By 2038, nearly half of all human life was wiped out, and the remaining megacities that isolated themselves from the rest of the world have collapsed under food shortages, lack of medical care, and corrupt leadership. The new super strain has a 100% mortality rate, and in all cases even a single exposure is fatal. The Italian government reached out to the CDC at the beginning of 2039 after one of their researchers discovered paperwork on a 14th century plague quarantine station on the island of Poveglia. The papers describe a hidden basement level in a partially collapsed hospital that was used by the government to perform vile experiments on affected plague patients. They would provide us access to the island and a guide to take us to the facility. In exchange, we would produce the cure on Italian soil and disclose all of our research to their doctors, in addition to keeping silent about their dark past. We agreed, of course, and readied for our expedition. The day our party landed on the docks of the overgrown island, there was a strange chill in the air for a hot summer day. We grabbed our equipment and set up a base camp and makeshift laboratory right next to the old hospital. I remember all of us being slightly hopeful for the first time in a long while. Our guide Valentina told us about the history of the island and its function of a quarantine zone during the original Black Plague. At nightfall, Valentina said she would take the boat back to the mainland and meet us here again in the morning. Something to do with local superstition, I guess. Though I wonder if there was something she didn't tell us at that time. We all sat around a makeshift campfire, and Dr. Yusuf even smiled at some point. I can't emphasize enough how monumental that was. As I lay down on my cot to try and get some rest before our journey into the sublevels the next day, I found myself staring at the ceiling of my tent. The moon was bright enough to turn it into a silver canopy, and the glow made me forget about all the misery we had seen the last 2 years. It was nice to be outside of a lab after such a long time, to hear the sound of crickets, night birds, and the gentle sound of waves. I have to admit that was the best sleep I had gotten in a very long time. When dawn finally came, Valentina was already waiting for us, sitting by the remnants of our campfire. She seemed uneasy and pushed us to suit up so we could get going as fast as possible. She reiterated how important it was that she was off the island before it got dark again that night. Once again, that felt very strange, but I chalked it up to superstition a second time. The ground floor of the hospital was unremarkable. There was scattered equipment from its 20th century history as a psychiatric ward and, surprisingly, no graffiti. Usually with these types of buildings, you'd see a lot of property damage and graffiti from urban explorers. Though, it seems that superstition plays a heavy role in these waters as the whole building has remained largely untouched. The basement consisted of storage rooms, isolation units, and most importantly, a large crematorium. Valentina led us to the back where the incinerators were, to a rather large but mundane broom closet. Moving some shelves near the back wall revealed a large iron door with no handle and 2 keyholes. She proceeded to pull out 2 large cast iron keys, inserted them into the locks, and turned. With a hiss, the seal on the old door was broken, and stale air hit us in the nostrils. The door was extremely heavy, and Valentina needed the help of Dr. Yusuf and Dr. Maxwell to push it open. All of us agreed that before we proceeded we should do a final check of our suits. After all, we couldn't be sure what kind of contaminants were down there. We proceeded to go down the cold stone staircase, which looked to have been carved out of the natural rock formations of the island. The further down we went, the more the sublevels started looking like a cave network. When we reached the end of a seemingly endless staircase, we arrived at a junction. On the left was a collapsed tunnel, with so much immovable rock that we'd need our laser cutters to get through. However, considering how deep we had descended, we decided to leave that section alone for now, as we couldn't be sure that the tunnel wasn't entirely flooded. On our right was a second staircase leading down, but our flashlights revealed that most of it was submerged. Unfortunately, we didn't prepare any diving gear for this expedition, so that section would have to be explored at a later time. Our only option remaining was to take the tunnel straight ahead of us. Both sides of the tunnel had metal doors leading to more storage, a few archives, and lastly, a large laboratory. The laboratory was largely intact, though it seemed that the scientists left in a hurry. Searching through the lab, we found multiple racks stacked with all manner of samples. Though some of the labels were hard to read due to their age, we were certain we had found what we needed. Dr. Yusuf started gathering samples on a nearby desk when Dr. Maxwell called us over from the hallway. "You need to see this," he shouted. Dr. Yusuf and I wandered back to the hallway where Dr. Maxwell was standing, pointing his flashlight up at the archway leading further down the tunnel. There were two symbols etched into the face of the stone. 2 eagles. The first one was holding a bundle of sticks with an axe head, and the other one was clutching a swastika. Dr. Yusuf loudly proclaimed, "You've got to be joking," while Dr. Maxwell chimed in with a, "Of course it had to be Nazis." I just shook my head in disbelief and looked over at Valentina. She immediately defended that the CDC had agreed to not speak of their dark past, though I told her that I wasn't so sure if war crimes were included in that. We proceeded to go further down the tunnel and eventually entered into an observatory. From the thick glass we could see into the rest of the room. It was a large stone circle with intricate carvings. Ancient Roman letters, obviously Latin. In the center of the circle was a very large metal coffin standing upright. Before I could even speak, Dr. Maxwell had already found the metal door leading down to the coffin. "This is amazing," he cheerfully said. "So much history, simply forgotten," he continued. Dr. Yusuf, Valentina and I followed him down to get a better look. It was then that I could make out what the ancient Latin said. "Polyphante's cursed blood is bound, condemned by Aphrodite's spite. A human soul rests underground. The Strix spreads her wings at night." It was some kind of ancient warning carved into the floor. Before I could finish the final sentence, Dr. Maxwell had already pried open the metal coffin, revealing the mostly dried up corpse of a woman. It was almost as if she was mummified, but she had no wrappings nor any clothes. The only notable thing was a shackle on her left ankle. Dr. Yusuf scolded him for being so careless. "We're the CDC, for God's sake. You should know better than to recklessly open containers," he said. Dr. Maxwell completely ignored him and proceeded to inspect the corpse. Valentina suddenly jumped as if she was spooked by something, and I asked her what was wrong. "Masticatore di sudario, a shroud eater," she said. Dr. Yusuf looked at her and said, "A vampire? Surely you must be joking." Dr. Maxwell finally spoke up and stated, "Nope, she's not joking. Look at the stone in the corpse's mouth." He proceeded to explain that shroud eaters were a common form of superstition during the Renaissance period, and that large stones were placed in the mouths of corpses to prevent them from eating through their burial cloth and becoming undead monsters. All superstition, of course, he shrugged. I should have told him to stop messing around with the corpse then, as my gut was telling me that something was wrong. The whole room felt bad, by lack of a better word. The fact that we were standing in an area meant to contain something didn't help either. That's when Dr. Maxwell suddenly winced in pain. For some awful reason, he had decided to try and remove the stone from the corpse's mouth, and in the process of removing it, he cut himself on one of its teeth. He was clearly bleeding and quickly retrieved a roll of duct tape from his bag and taped his suit shut. At that point, I decided that we had had enough excitement for one day and ordered that we'd return to the surface. We hurried ourselves back to base camp and helped Dr. Maxwell out of his suit, proceeded to decontaminate him and take care of his wound. Dr. Yusuf immediately started blood tests to make sure he hadn't been contaminated. Valentina and I sat with him for a while, before she said goodnight and left with the boat. Right before she left, she looked at me and she said, "Good luck with your friend." Uneasily, I thanked her and wished her a safe journey. It wasn't long before he turned a sickly pale, and Dr. Yusuf confirmed that he had been infected with a strain of plague that he didn't recognize. Dr. Maxwell agreed to let him take more blood to run additional tests, and I helped him to his cot after that, hoping some rest would do him well. I said goodnight to Dr. Yusuf as he continued to study the new strain. I spent a couple of minutes writing an incident report on my datapad before turning in for the night. I remember the moon being brighter than it was the night before, and somehow it was really quiet. Only the sloshing of the water remained, like all forms of life had gone. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a bird shrieking. I thought it was strange that I could still only hear the sound of water before the shriek came again, only closer this time. That's when I heard a scream. I rushed out of my tent to find Dr. Yusuf on the floor, tightly clutching his arm as blood dripped down his elbow. "What happened?" I yelled. "Some kind of large bird attacked me," he painfully exclaimed. As I tried to help him to his feet, I heard another loud shriek behind me and he pushed me aside. As I lay there on the floor, I saw a large humanoid bird ripping and tearing into Dr. Yusuf's belly, tossing large chunks of meat aside. He screamed and writhed there on the floor for far too long before he finally stopped moving. Paralyzed by fear, I stared at the bird-like creature pushing its beak deep into the fleshy mess of a corpse that used to be my dear friend. I don't know what horrified me more, the squelching of flesh or the gulping of blood. When it finished drinking, it raised its beak to the sky, bathing in the moonlight as crimson dewdrops dripped from its beak. It let out a shriek so loud I was afraid it would rupture my eardrums. Then, it took wing and flew into the night sky. I don't know if I laid there for a couple of minutes or multiple hours, but when the first rays of sunshine hit my face, I finally broke free from the paralyzing fear that had gripped me. I stumbled to my feet and quickly realized I didn't see Dr. Maxwell. As I rushed into his tent, all I saw was a large bloodstain on his cot and a puddle of vomit on the floor. A small blood trail that led out of the back of the tent caught my eye, so I decided to follow it. I clipped one of the laser cutters as a makeshift weapon to my belt, suited up, and followed the trail of blood back into the hospital. As I feared, the trail had led me all the way back to the room with the metal coffin. When I got there, the coffin was empty, and Dr. Maxwell was lying on the floor in a puddle of his own blood. I rushed to him to see what I could do. He looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry, I was an idiot." I nodded and told him he was going to be fine. "Don't worry about me, I've already come to terms with it," he sputtered. As I wanted to grab his hand, I got hit in the side and was thrown to the far side of the room. A woman, wearing nothing but a shackle on her left ankle, was now standing where I was, leaning over my friend. She spoke to him in a soft voice, telling him the pain would soon end and that they would go forth from that place to spread their gift to the world. Holding on to my undoubtedly broken ribs, I laughed and slightly winced as she said that. "What gift?" I said. "Decay and death?" I continued. I laughed again and she took 4 long strides in my direction. "My gift," she panted, "is immortality, child." I argued that if immortality meant being locked up in a metal box for hundreds of years, that I would take a hard pass. By now she was standing directly over me, staring down with the eyes of a predator. "I'm not scared of dying," I exclaimed. A white-toothed grin is all she responded with, as she proceeded to tear open my helmet and suit. The smell was what hit me first. Unmistakably the smell of death. Was it Dr. Maxwell, or had the smell always been here? The sound of squelching came next, as my friend started convulsing on the floor. He writhed and tossed and turned until the blisters on his skin burst open, revealing small feathers that quickly covered his entire body. Slowly, the humanoid bird that was once my friend stood up, looking longingly at the woman as if he was enthralled by her. She looked at the birdman and then pointed at me. Slowly, it shuffled over to me, as if it was learning how to walk in a new body for the first time. It made some kind of chittering sound as it reached for me. I kicked it in the legs, knocking it briefly off balance, and took my chance to get up. It let out a shrill cry and with newfound speed lunged at me. I swung my backpack off my shoulder and hit it square in the beak. That didn't seem to slow it down at all, as it immediately came for me again, knocking me to the floor and digging its beak deep into my shoulder. I cried out in pain and looked for anything to fight back with. I grabbed a nearby loose brick and started hitting it in the face, releasing its hold over me. I pushed it off, and as my adrenaline surged, I knocked it to the ground. I screamed and bashed until its head was a bloody mess and it finally stopped moving. The whole time, the woman had been looking at me with a look of approval. She came over, took the brick from my hand and said, "You are worthy of my gift," and bit me in the already exposed shoulder. As I felt her drink from my veins, I reached for the laser cutter on my belt, pushed it into her side, and pulled the trigger. The laser cutter sliced through her flesh like a warm knife through butter, releasing a mist of blood behind her. She dropped to the ground, smiled and hissed through her teeth that I was worthy of her gift, and that I'd be seeing her again very soon. When she stopped moving, I didn't hesitate. Regardless of my wounds, I pulled her body back to the coffin, propped her up, and closed the latches once more. This nightmare was finally over, but it was already too late. The boils on my arms grow faster than I expected, and no doubt feathers will sprout from them soon. I've written down my story and placed my datapad behind the metal door of the observatory. I will use my laser cutter to collapse the ceiling and block the door, so that no one can ever find us here. As my final warning to who reads this, sometimes the past is better left alone. We came searching for a cure, but found something far worse. Don't come looking for us. Signed, Dr. Anna Latreya. This story was written and produced by Haunted House Studios. If you'd like to hear your own story on the show, be sure to send an email to submissions@hauntedhousestudios.com. For links and socials, visit www.hauntedhousestudios.com.